In the 12th year of the Wanhe reign, the plum blossoms fell early. The air was soft with rain, and the wind carried the scent of old things, wet stone, ink, and memories too stubborn to fade. Inside a quiet manor behind ironwood gates lived a young widow named Meiyun. But no one called her that anymore. She was Madame Li now, the widow of Lord Li Wenbo, a man old enough to be her father. She had been 16 when they married. Her mother had kissed her forehead goodbye with trembling lips. Her father had looked away as he handed her over to the Li family, thanking the heavens that their daughter would at least sleep with a roof over her head. Lord Li had been distant but not cruel. He preferred ledgers to laughter, scrolls to small talk. He coughed often, drank often, and died quietly in his study during the second winter of their marriage. Meiyun wore white to the funeral and did not cry. No one asked if she missed him. They only reminded her what she was now, a widow, a Li woman, a shadow behind the screen. "Your place is here," her mother-in-law said. "A Li woman belongs to us, in life and death." Meiyun bowed, and the doors closed. For 5 years, she lived behind those carved screens. No men spoke to her. No visitors stayed long. Her world shrank to the walls of her room, the edges of her embroidery hoop, the weight of the silence that never lifted. She read. She sewed. She listened to the rain. Sometimes she stood by the window, watching the garden she was never allowed to enter. But she did not cry, not once. Until one spring, a new voice entered the manor. His name was On Lian. He was a calligraphy teacher hired to tutor the young nephews in the Li household. He arrived with nothing but a brush roll, a clean robe, and a quiet smile. His eyes were warm, and he bowed deeper than the others, even to a widow like her. He was beneath her in station, a servant, a guest. But to Meiyun, he was something else. He did not speak to her, but when he passed her in the corridor, he stepped aside gently, as if even her silence had weight. And one day, when she left tea on the windowsill, an old habit from when her husband was alive, she returned to find a piece of paper beneath the cup. A poem. 5 lines. Neatly written. No name. "The garden outside sleeps, but the wind still remembers you. Do not forget yourself." She read it twice, then burned it. But the next day, there was another. For weeks, they never spoke, only exchanged poems. He left them folded in her teacup, under her pillow, or slipped between the pages of the books she borrowed. She never replied in words, but once, she left a single camellia petal in his bowl. And another time, a poem she had copied years ago, but written in her own hand this time. Their words never crossed lips, but her veil began to fall lower. Her steps grew lighter, and her eyes no longer stared at nothing. But joy, even when silent, has a sound. One evening, her chamber was torn apart. The scrolls were gone. The poems burned. Her mother-in-law's voice thundered through the manor. "You shame his name. You stain our blood." They called her a traitor, a harlot, a disgrace. She was to be sent to Yunshan Temple, a place where widows went to grow old alone, chanting prayers in stone halls, their names slowly forgotten. Meiyun said nothing. She simply bowed, as she had been taught. But her heart did not bow. That night, the maidservants whispered that they saw her walking barefoot past the east wing. Her veil trailed behind her like a ghost's breath. But the guards found nothing. No footsteps, no opened doors, only a folded poem on her pillow. Meet me where the world ends, where no one remembers your name. And the next morning, she was gone. Some say she drowned herself in the eastern lake. Others say she fled in a merchant cart before dawn. But the truth lay far from both. Meiyun and Onlian escaped to the southern provinces. They traveled by night, rested by roadside inns, and finally settled in a quiet village by the hills, where the trees still bloomed freely. There, no one knew her name, so she wrote it again. They did not marry. There was no ceremony, no vows, no chains. She had been owned once. She would never be owned again. He built her a studio of bamboo and stone. The scent of jasmine filled the rooms. She wrote letters for villagers, taught poetry to orphans, brewed tea for the broken-hearted, and every morning he made her laugh. Years passed. Wandering scholars began to speak of a woman by the hills who could write sorrow into silence, who healed not with medicine, but with stories and tea. No one knew where she came from, only that her eyes held winters she no longer feared. Back in the Lee Manor, her mother-in-law grew old and bitter, waiting for an apology that never came. She died clutching a jade hairpin Meiyun once wore. In Yunshin Temple, the stones stayed cold, but on the western bridge outside it, someone once carved 4 tiny characters. The cloud returns with spring. Would you still love someone if the world told you it was forbidden? Would you wait behind carved screens or walk barefoot into the unknown? Some loves are not loud. They do not shout. They do not bloom in sunlight, but they survive quietly, steadily, and sometimes they return.